You know who loves it when you're stuck at home? Your dog. Being with you 24/7 is a dream come true. But what happens when you go back to work? They're not used to you leaving, and they may think it means you're never coming back. You have to make it clear that leaving doesn't mean forever. Explaining won't work. You have to do it with your actions. Start by going away for a short amount of time. You can even just go into another room and shut the door. Just a few seconds to start. Repeat with longer and longer absences. Increase really slowly, by only a few seconds or a minute at a time at first. Don't make a big deal out of leaving. Just quietly walk out. Don't throw a party when you return. Just quietly come in and walk away. If you have telltale signs that you're about to go out, like picking up your keys or putting on your coat, do those throughout the day. Without leaving, soon your dog won't automatically panic at those signals. Remember, no big goodbye scenes, no welcome home parties, just calm entrances and exits with longer and longer absences. Soon, your dog will figure out that coming and going is just part of the day, and that rain or shine, you're always coming back.
Hello, and welcome to the Cartoon Art Museum's Toon Talk. It's the 25th anniversary of MUTTS with Patrick McDonnell in conversation with Glen David Gold. That lovely animation that we just watched was called Before You Go. It was drawn by a 12-year-old named Sissel, who was a daughter of one of the volunteers at Muttville, and produced by Jane Goldman. Muttville is a senior dog adoption organization in the Bay Area, and we are promoting their cause in conjunction with this event. Their mission is to give senior dogs a second chance at life, and they rescue them, give them the care they need, find them loving homes, and spread the word about how wonderful they are. To find out more about Muttville, you can check them out at muttville.org. That's MUTTFBILLE.org. I'm Summerlee Kashar. I'm the executive director here at the Cartoon Art Museum, and I want to thank you for attending this event. The Cartoon Art Museum has been around for more than 35 years, and we've had many locations at this point and face many challenges. And somehow, with the help of angels, we have been around and we continue to make it through. Despite our small size, we represent the medium locally, nationally, and internationally. And we could not do this without the support of our board and our staff, donors, artists, members, and people like you. So I want to thank you. For this event, we are streaming through YouTube. So if you have questions, we will do a question and answer period at the end. And you can pose the questions either in the chat comments on YouTube, or you can send them to my email address, which is office@cartoonart.org. We'll put that in the comments field as well so that you know. But I would like to introduce today's guest. So we have Glen David Gold, who, if you're not familiar, Glen David Gold is an acclaimed American novelist, memoirist, screenwriter, known for his best-selling novels, Carter Beats the Devil, Sunny Side, and his most recent memoir, I Will Be Complete, as well as writing for comics and television and podcasting. Gold is also a collector and an authority on comics and graphic novels, and he's a friend of the Cartoon Art Museum and has done things with us before, so we're extremely grateful to have him back with us today. Patrick McDonnell, yeah, we all know, or else why would we be here? Patrick's revered comic strip Mutts has been published for over 25 years now, and Patrick has brought these two little critters into our lives, sharing their foibles and follies and the simple things in life, like a little pink sock. He's also created Me, Jane, a picture book about Jane Goodall, garnering a Caldecott honor, as well as illustrations for many national publications. But in addition to Patrick's work and his dedication to the very creatures he draws, both Patrick and his wife Karen are fierce advocates of pet adoption and the environment, and we are pleased to have him here with us today. We will now switch to our presentation. Please be patient while we return to the welcome screen just for a few moments.
You guys are live.
Hey, Glenn.
Howdy, Patrick.
Hello, YouTube.
It's nice to see you. By the way, thank you to everybody who's joining us today in this interesting new world of how we now get together. We're all getting used to it a bit at a time, and I'm very grateful to the Cartoon Art Museum for easing us into this as easily as possible. So thank you very much. So the way this is going to work is Patrick and I are going to talk. We're going to look at some slides here. And if you guys, as you're watching, you have some questions, type them into the chat, and we will get to those toward the end. Howdy, Patrick.
Hey, Glenn. Hey, before we start, I'd like to give a thank you to Muttville, the organization that helps senior dogs, which has a big place in my heart because, Earl, my real dog that my comic dog is based on lived to 19 years old. So there's nothing like a senior dog. At the end, all that's left is the love, and I just love old dogs.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. It's and I'm just we're going to start. We're going to basically you've been doing Mutts for 25 years now, and there's this lovely book to talk about. I just wanted to just very quickly. Do you remember when you and I first met?
Yes.
You remember where we were?
Now tell me if I'm wrong. I remember going to a restaurant with you.
The very first time we met was at the Cartoon Art Museum.
Wow. Okay. Yes. Now I remember.
So I am in addition to everything else, I'm a collector, and so Patrick was doing a signing, and I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I did what all collectors do: is I showed up hoping I could pick the artist up, turn him upside down, and see what sort of art might fall out if I asked. And what happened on the other side of it was actually a very nice, lovely friendship based in creativity. Because one of the things I love about Patrick is how he thinks, not just how he works, but how he thinks about work and what he lets go about thinking in his fields instead. So you have a book called The Art of Nothing. How, after 25 years, did you come up with the title of Nothing?
Well, it's with Abram Books, and my editor was Charlie Kochman, who was just a great editor. All editors tell you whatever you want, I'll do. And he actually did what I wanted, which was really sweet. And Charlie came up with the title. I did a children's book with the Mutts characters called The Gift of Nothing. Actually, it was my first picture book. And Charlie sarcastically thought it was funny, let's call it The Art of Nothing. But, I laughed, but then I thought about it, and I really thought that was a good title, because it's, as a cartoonist, every day you stare at that white paper of nothing and try to make something. So I thought it was a good title, and that cover drawings kind of symbolizes that. Of all the mooches, like, what's next?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. As somebody who faces a blank page myself, or a blank screen as well, there's something about the generation that happens, that there's just something waiting to happen as long as you listen.
Right, it's a nice combination of scary and exciting at the same time.
That's good. I would love to see the next slide. Cool. And by the way, if I may ask, is there any delay when we ask for the slides, or does that come up? Okay, grand. So could you tell us about what the strip is?
Well, this was actually the first Mutt strip from September 5th, 1994. And, when I did it, I just thought it was a cute strip and a nice way to start. But years later, I looked at it and I realized it was autobiographical, because, Earl's and Ozzy are driving along, and Ozzy says, "We're home." Earl comes out with the long tongue. But I really did feel like I was finally home. I mean, I wanted to be a cartoonist since I could remember. My first memories as a kid was looking at my mom's collections of Pogo and Jules Pfeiffer cartoon books. And I was just mesmerized by how those little black and white drawings came to life on the page and continued to be my whole life. And, growing up, I grew up in the 60s, so it was Peanuts. I just fell in love with Snoopy and Peanuts. And, wanted to be a cartoonist. And then I became a teenager and was in a rock band, and then went to art school, but, wasn't sure it was going to be cartooning. And then when I left art school, I started getting magazine illustration work, and that kept me busy for 10 years. But the whole time I kept on saying, I really should be doing a cartoon. And then I finally came up with Mutts. After I did, I felt like I was home. I was doing what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, because it definitely felt like from the very beginning you hit it instantly in a way that you definitely had arrived here. When you look at this strip, and I mean, I have an answer for it there, but do you see your influences in that strip? Your forefathers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of. I've definitely come from the less is more school, so I like things being simple. I don't see Peanuts in the sense, he had such a fluid roundness line, but I see Peanuts in the simplicity. But mostly, I was a real fan of the old comic strips, Crazy Cat, and Barney Google, and Seagar's Popeye, and they just had such a scratchiness and looseness. So I definitely see that coming through. In this.
Just on a technical note, by the way, is that a wash or is that craft tin?
That's craft tin paper, which, it's funny. As a magazine illustrator, magazines have better reproduction. So all my illustrations had watercolor, but for the newspapers, you can't do watercolor. They back then, and I even think today, it's really hard for them to print that correctly. So I wanted the gray tone, and then I discovered actually a cartoonist friend of mine, Joe Coleman, was using craft tint in his comics, and hipped me to craft tint, where you could get these lines to make a gray tone. Unfortunately, 3 years into it, I discovered craft tint has mercury and got mercury poisoning for a while there. So that's when I gave up craft tint.
Yeah, well, that's good for all of us that you gave up to that. Might we see the next slide? We'll talk about this, but I also want people to get a chance to absorb it panel by panel. This is one of the more complicated Sundays of yours. It is also.
Tell you what, I'll read it.
Please, yeah.
Yeah. So Earl's laying there on the sidewalk. Mooch comes along. Earl, you'll melt in this hot sun. I like it. Me, I'm finding a cool spot. Phew, for once that cat was right. This guy comes along. He never appeared in Mutts again. Oops, my ice cream. The ice cream melts. Mooch comes back. Earl, you big stupid. I told you. Oh, Earl, wah. Picks up the cherry. Sniff his little heart. Poor Earl. Sweet, sweet Earl. Sweet, sniff. Sweet, lick. Sweet, slurp, slurp. Earl. Mooch, what are you doing? Feeling a lot less guilty.
So
I'm glad you picked this one. This is one of my favorite Mutts after 25 years.
So please tell us why.
You know why? Because, again, the process. I've been doing it for 25 years, and there's only a handful of strips that I was laughing the whole time I was drawing it. And this was one of them. Creativity is a funny thing. You don't know where the ideas come from. And this one, came from the universe, and it's funny that you could surprise yourself and crack yourself up. But this one surprised me and cracked me up. And again, it doesn't happen all that often. I mean, a lot of strips put a smile on my face, and I like them. But it's rare that I felt like someone was telling me a joke, and I was laughing while he was telling me.
Yeah, I mean, there's many things that I like about this strip. One of them is that I was surprised when I got to the last panel there. That's a great summary. But also, you work in a sight gag. You work in, and then also you have the dialogue as well. That all works really well, and also they're in character, and there's a lot of stuff going on in it. And also just on a basic level, it made me laugh.
I think that Sniff His Willow Heart is one of my favorite panels.
That's good. Yeah, let's take a look at the next one. And would you read us this?
Yeah, you want me to read this one too? Jeez.
Please.
Same old yucky dry food. Same old squeaky door. Same old boring toys. Same old mopey fish. Same old stupid dead mouse. Same old smelly litter box. Same old frayed drapes. He looks at Frank. Same old, sniff. Home sweet home.
So there was a couple reasons that I chose this. One is that it's very sweet. The second is the influences in it. Beyond the top right panel, Charlie Brown shirt that's in there secretly. The rest of it, I'm curious how you ended up choosing Basquiat.
That first panel is called the title panel, and it's also called the throwaway panel because some newspapers don't use them and throw them away, and other newspapers use them. And that's the first one that I did based on someone else's art. And then that became what the title panels became for me. I would do a famous painting or a famous book cover or magazine cover or a poster. And I would pick, I would mostly from memory, think of a piece of art that would relate to I would write the strip first, of course, and then try to think of what famous piece of art could make a statement about the strip itself. And for this one, Mooch uses the phrase "same old," And Basquiat is a painter in New York who started out as a graffiti artist, and his tag was SAMO, SAMO, which stood for same old, same old. And so that's why I use Basquiat. I also use Basquiat because he's like one of my favorite painters, and just love his work because it has a really strong cartoon influence to it. So that title panel was the first title panel I did based on someone else's artwork, and it's fairly. I think it's in the first couple of months of the strip. For the first few months, I was doing my own title panels,
Yeah.
but I think this was the first one that I used someone else's, and that too was kind of based on Crazy Cat, because Crazy Cat in his later strips, would always have his Crazy Cat title in different ways in different places. And, most cartoonists have a standard title panel, and lately I've been doing that a little more too. But it was fun to play with the title panel. Speaking of Crazy Cat, today's George Herman's birthday.
Oh,
140 years if he was still alive.
Oh, happy birthday, Garge.
Yeah, George.
That's great. But speaking of that, I only noticed this now. To the right of where it says the word Mutts in the Basquiat, there's an X in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
Is that his or is that?
I threw in a little Herman there.
Okay.
It's funny. This is the first one I did, and I didn't copy an exact Basquiat painting. I just kind of did his style. But then after this, I would copy exact things. So this one was a little free form, a little Basquiat, like you said, a little Charlie Brown zigzag, and a little Crazy Cat X in a circle.
Great, cool. Let's see the next slide, please. Okay. So I would say your idea of using title panels caught on. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it became. It was a nice puzzle. It really made me visual. People we are like. There's so many images. Like I never was at a loss to finding something to play with, and usually things that, again, from my memory, things that meant something to me. On occasion, I would just go through books and find new things that worked for the strip. But a lot of these things are paintings I liked or paintings I was familiar with, and stayed with me. The top one there is Vermeer. And that was the other thing that was really exciting about the title panels was, I learned my chops on how to color a Sunday, because to try to copy an oil painting in the colors of a comic strip was really tricky. There's a lot of fades there and different tricks that took me a while to learn how to do. Yeah, it was crazy. I spent as much time on the title panel sometimes as I did the whole strip. The next one.
Is that Controversy, the third one there?
Yeah, it's. God, my mind's going blank. Clement, right? Is that how you say his name? Like the Kiss.
Yeah.
That one was extra tough. Yeah, that was extra tough to get that. It's crazy. When I was doing these, I never left my house. Now I get out once in a while. Well, it's fun. The second one, the Great Wave, the Japanese prints were the most fun to do, because the Japanese prints were kind of done the way comic strips were done. There was black line, and then there were 4 plates of color to get those colors. So, and I learned that I had Will Eisner as a teacher when I went to the School of Visual Arts, and he hipped me to Chinese prints and how close they were to newspaper comics. So those were the ones I think came out the best, because it was kind of the same process compared to trying to do an oil painting in newspaper color.
That's really cool. When you look at these, by the way, when you are, it's funny. I'm thinking in the back of my head. I just read the Comic Art and Museums book that Kim Munson just came out with. I'm going through it a little bit, essay by essay. And one of the things they talked about was an early exhibition of comic art in New York was that high-low show, high and low.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
When you look, because this is interesting, you have 8 panels here that go all the way from high art to movie posters to comic books. do they occupy, I mean, is it kind of a general feeling of like influence, or do you feel like something is more powerful than another, or is it all, does it all feel like kind of equal to you in a way?
I think it's all equal. I think probably starting with my generation, but definitely today's generation, I don't think there's any lines anymore like that. I think, and that was so great about Basquiat's work and Keith Haring and those guys. I mean, we grew up on television and comics, just the same way we grew up with paintings and going to museums. So it all kind of just flows together. And why not? I definitely feel like, I remember going to college, I felt a little bit of the high-low, but boy, I don't feel that at all today.
That's a very good answer, and we will allow the interview to continue. Let's please look at
This one I don't have to read.
Or you just did. So I put this up here for two reasons. One of them is it just made me laugh. And I once saw a comedian who opened a giant show. It was like 2,000 people in an auditorium, and he just said he's trying to figure out how little he could do and have it actually be comedy. And you have succeeded in this. This is as little as possible, and yet it was a comedy.
Well, thank you. I'll take that as the highest compliment. You reminded me. I saw Pee Wee Herman was on Broadway a few years ago. He had a Broadway show, and there was a whole written show with a plot and everything. There was one point in the show where he just blew up a balloon and then squeezed it so it would make that squeaky noise the balloon makes. And he did that for 10 minutes, and that was the highlight of the show for me anyway. This was just so simple and so stupid. I feel like that's the best humor. So, again, I said up front that I'm from the less is more school, and this is definitely in that less is more school. I really feel like comics are a lot like haiku poetry. I mean, you have such little space, and you have to say a lot with the little, and how can you get away with saying so much with so little? So, and I think the other one with this one, too, is, with MUTTS, when I started, and I still believe in it, but, I really was trying to keep the animals animal-like. Most cartoons that have animals in them, work on computers and are pretty much just humans in little dog suits or animal suits. When I started MUTTS, I really wanted it. I mean, it was based on my own dogs, and he was so great and filled with so much joy. I was really trying to capture him in the strip. So I purposely was just trying to do strips that were very cat-like and dog-like. And mainly because anyone who has a cat and dog know how funny they are. They don't necessarily need dialogue to be funny. So I think any cat person would get this joke, because you never know where they're going to pop up.
Absolutely. Let's see the next slide, please. Again, if you got cats in the previous strip, this with dogs and their owners as well. Do you remember making this strip?
Yeah, I do. Yes. Although, it's funny, you do something for 25 years. I never thought it would happen, but now there's strips I look at, I don't remember them. I used to know every single one of them. Now I look at them sometimes and I say, wow, who did that? Yeah. You know what else is interesting? When you do something for 25 years, and you see this in all comic strips, they evolve, the art changes, the characters change, and it's nothing you sit down and plan to do. It just happens like life. It just they change while you change, and you don't even know what's happening.
Have you noticed that recently in your characters? There's some specific changes that you've noticed.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look at, I mean, not only the craft and how I worked, but I mean, just the shape of the characters, their heads, the way I draw them. But it's true. I mean, I discovered that most cartoons, I don't know if this is like real life, but usually the characters get thicker and fatter. I don't know if that's just life.
Kirby, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and rounder. Jack Kirby's one, Peanuts. I mean, they just got thicker, and And Crazy Cat's probably, in my opinion, you look at the first year of Crazy Cat compared to the last year, it doesn't even look like the same characters. I mean, they are, but they evolve so much. And now 25 years later, I'm seeing it with my own strip. I mean, for me, with Crazy Cat, I mean, I love all the different years, but I particularly like their early stuff. New stuff, the later stuff doesn't look like it at all. And with me, my early stuff doesn't look like my new stuff. And it's funny, I just did a talk with Lynn Johnston. We were talking about that. And we were both saying how we can't even draw like that. So like, if you asked me to draw like Mutts looks like in the first year, I would have to be like any other artist. I'd have to look at the book and try to copy it. It wouldn't come out naturally, I don't think.
So interesting. Is there a sort of sense of muscle memory in that, or is it just you changing, do you feel, is your relationship to art?
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be an interesting thing to figure out, but
because it is.
Look at all cartoons. They all change. I don't. Maybe, like you said, muscle memory, or you get better, maybe. But I don't even know if better is the right word. Because I love my early stuff. I like the crazy looseness of it, and not knowing anything. I all my art, I've grown up in public. When I was a magazine illustrator, I got really lucky, and my first job was with the New York Times, where Russell Baker had a column in the Sunday magazine, and it was a weekly gig. So all of a sudden, I was like a kid in college, and now I'm drawing a weekly illustration for the New York Times of all places. And I literally had to grow up in public. And even though I wanted to be a cartoonist my whole life, until you do it, you have no idea what you're doing. So that first year of Mutts was by this with your fingers crossed the whole time.
Right, we're flying by the seat of your pants.
Oh, without a doubt. And, it's funny. Like I said, it was my dream since I was 5 years old or whatever to be a cartoonist. But that whole time, not once did I ever think about the deadline. Probably if I did, I wouldn't have had that dream. But
I kind of like you waiting at 5 and just sweating, going, the deadlines.
I don't think it was until a month into it. It was like, oh my God, this isn't going to stop. If I'm lucky and the strip gets successful, this is never going to end.
Let's look at the next slide, please. So one of the things that I love about your work is, so I go on the spiel a lot when I talk to students about creating character, is that there's kind of two poles, at least in fiction, and I think it might work in other forms as well when you create characters, is you can create characters from a kind of a jadedness or cynicism or contempt, basically people you want to throw rocks at, and satire. And then the other pole is just complete empathy and compassion. And not only do you create characters out of empathy and compassion, but you have great gestures of compassion in your strip. Just when I look at this, it's like I want to hold the umbrella for Guard Dog as well when I see that. I'm just curious what sort of reactions people have to Guard Dog and to strips about him.
Well, poor Guard Dog. People want me to free him, and I've been promising it for a few years, and it's definitely going to happen fairly soon. But I felt like all these years he had a job to do. Like I feel like if I inspire one person to unchain their dog, it was worth doing. Yeah. It's funny when I first drew Guard Dog in my sketchbook, he didn't appear in the strip for a couple of months. And when I first drew him, I was really looking for that maybe Earl and Mooch needed a villain. Someone who would harass them and someone they would have to get over on. So, it dawned on me I would draw a big, tough dog, and I drew this really tough-looking dog. And then I figured, well, I'll make him even tougher. I'll put one of those chains on him with spikes. And then I put a chain on him. Then I looked at that drawing, and I said, oh, my God, this isn't a tough dog. This is a tragic dog. And that really made the character. That's who he became, and I felt like he had a job to do to maybe wise some people up. And he's one of my favorite characters. And, Doozy's the little girl who's trying to save him. And I see you pick another. I guess you don't like my writing. You're picking all strips with no words.
This is accidental in this case.
And these are special to me, and the nicest thing about becoming a cartoonist is I did get to become friends with my hero Charles Schultz. And Charles Schultz told me the strips he was most proud of were the ones that didn't have any words. That
Interesting.
Yeah, that the pantomime ones. That's a visual medium. If you can make a joke without any words, that he would again try to get to the heart of the matter and get it down to the least amount of words as possible.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that.
And I like drawing rain. I think all cartoonists like drawing rain.
Well, you were Eisner's. You were in his class. I think there's probably an entire class he taught in Eisner scripts.
Well, my rain might come to Eisner, and also definitely Eisner telling me about the Japanese prints, because I would never. You see the straight lines, the diagonal straight lines.
Yeah,
that's a Hiroshige thing. If you look at that famous bridge painting, he does that, and he says, "Why does that work?" It makes no sense why that should work, but that adds to it for some reason.
It really does, though. Yeah, no, now that I see it, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing what little things you can steal from people that work.
Let's take a look at the next slide, please. All right. So you do a lot of brainstorming with ways that your characters can go, and then also you have an awful lot of salutes to mainstream comic characters here. I just one of the reasons I just picked this is that I loved the idea of. I could see your mind working here, or your pen working, and just spilling it out. Is it you're just sort of, as they say, spitballing here in this case, just seeing what.
I'm a professional spitballer. That's what I did. The combination of a professional spitballer and a professional doodler. Yeah, and actually, this is from the book, the 25th anniversary book, The Art of Nothing. I really wanted to show the process. So the book has a lot of my sketchbooks, which are, I love any artist's sketches. My own, I just love looking at the sketchbooks, because that's where it really happens. That's where, you spitball and you start thinking of things, and things happen right in front of you. And, in honor of Comic-Con, every summer I try to do a week of comic book characters. So this was me trying to figure out which one of my characters could be which superhero. I particularly like Doctor Strange.
I was just going to say, yeah, definitely. And and I just have to point this out for people who don't have the book already yet. One of the great things about it is there is a lot of process pages in there. I think that as fans, we want to know more about stuff that we didn't actually see on the page, how it got there, and things that might not be obvious. And it's really interesting to take a strip that is nothing and see how much goes into that. It's sort of the way that all the different colors in the rainbow add up to nothing in a way. There's a lot going on.
And I definitely think visual. When I have a sketchbook trying to think of strips, it's not the writing as much as the drawing, trying to think of different situations, different, it's mostly visual thinking.
Yeah. Let's take a look at the next slide, please. So
I'm not going to take credit for that.
Yeah. So speaking of comics, so were you, when you were, can you talk to us a little bit about discovering Jack Kirby?
Sure. Well, you and I talk about Jack Kirby a lot. Glen's an expert and a big fan, and I am too. But no, I was lucky. Growing up in the '60s, I watched Peanuts develop before my eyes, and I got to see Marvel Comics develop before my eyes. I mean, I was really young, but even as a young kid, those Jack Kirby comics were just, they blew your mind. And to go to the comic store, not even a comic store, it was it was a luncheonette that sold comics on a rack. You'd go there and see the latest Fantastic Four, you'd go crazy. And I just always loved his work. I just feel like he's a genius. I mean, you think of all the concepts I've been doing much for 25 years. I'm still, maybe I have 12 characters. When you think, I mean, did anyone ever count how many characters did Jack Kirby invent? It must be thousands. And each one of them great, and I love the way he draws. And he's just a hero. I see you have a Jack Kirby behind you.
I do. This is from the Kirby Museum. This is a print of Jack's Dream Machine, one of the few pieces he drew for himself.
And probably one of my favorite drawings of his. And if I tilt my computer a little bit, that's my Eternal page.
Nice.
Behind me.
That looks like an Eternals double splash to me. And,
yeah, it is.
Nice. That's very cool. And and one of the things, it's very funny because you and I have talked so many times about art and influences and stuff. And one of the reasons I am always excited to talk to you about it is that there's a lot of overlap with us about what gets us excited about art from all different places and all different things, from the woodcuts to the comics. So this next slide, I know please put this up because this is very exciting to me as a fan. So it looks a lot like the cover we just had up, the Fantastic Four 51 cover, and yet it is a Mutts Sunday. Can you tell us about this?
Well, you and I had the great pleasure to meet Joe Sinnott at his house in upstate New York, and a friend of my brother's was good friends with him, and he asked if we would like to go visit. And of course, I wanted to visit him. Joe Sinnott was Jack Kirby inker supreme, and he inked all the Fantastic Four books. Not all of them. You probably know. What issue did he start? 30-something.
He did issue 5, and then he came back in issue 44. Gorgon.
Yeah. So we got to meet him, and he's the sweetest guy. And someone, I don't remember who, maybe it was you, said that he would. How old was he? We met him like 92, 91?
Yeah, he's 92.
And he was still inking. He was still inking the Spider-Man Sunday page. And someone there said that he should ink a Mutts, and he agreed to do it. So, boy, I immediately penciled 2 Mutts Sunday pages based on Fantastic Four covers and mailed it to him. And that's like a dream come true. I had Joe Sinnott ink the Mutts page.
Yeah, it's fabulous work. It's really exciting to see. Let's take a look at the next slide, please. So one of the things that it always interests me about your work is that Kirby, of course, was everything in a dense page. And it was almost hard to see subtext because it seemed like it was all text. And on the other side of it, you have your more, I'm going to say manga, more in the Hokusai sort of, the 17th, 18th century version of it as far as I'd say. Can you talk about the influences on this and what this is?
Sure. Well, if you remember, you and I went to a show of Japanese book illustrations from what years were they from?
I want to say
late
from 17th century to the 19th century.
Yeah. Like so it was at the New York Public Library, and it was just the most amazing show. These books were just gorgeous, and the drawings were gorgeous, and again that connection to comics because they were mostly black and white with ink, and I just fell in love with that show, and went out and got bamboo brushes and the ink where you have to suma ink, is that what it's called, where you have to grind it, and it was just fun to play with. And this is from another picture book called South that starred Mooch. And what's nice about doing the picture books, for how much I love doing the comic strip stays pretty routine. I mean, it's always the same size, it's always pen and ink, and it can't vary that much. But with the picture books, I get to play. I get to have fun with different mediums that I never get to play with the strip. So it was just really fun to use a different brush on different paper and have the Mutts characters live in a different world, which I feel like they were comfortable in.
Yeah, I agree. It's not like one of those things where you've suddenly turned something into 3 dimensions that shouldn't be, or something like that. It's just a different approach, but it still fits your characters. Which is really interesting.
The other funny story with this book was, again with the less is more, when I submitted the book to Little Brown, um, my publisher, my editor, um, liked it, and we were working on it. And the original premise had a lot of dialogue and a lot of text. And again, like a poet, just whittling things down. And I remember there was one day I called up my editor and I said, I have one more edit. She goes, okay, what's the edit? I said, I got rid of all the words. It became a pantomime book.
I can't tell you how many editors wish that I would do the same thing with my this is slightly tangential, but this is for people in the audience here. And the thing that came up in my mind is Sue Me Inc. The Art of Nothing book, at the end of it, we don't have any slides for this, but you have a conversation with Linda Berry, who in my head is sort of the queen of Sue Me Inc. Something I would encourage everybody to get the book, if only for the discussion between the two of you and how it goes down. Do you have anything to say about that process?
Oh my God! Well, Linda is just a genius, and yeah, she does use the bamboo brushes and Sumi ink, and is a master at it. But she is, my editor Charlie and I were trying to think of someone maybe to interview me for the book, and actually you were on the list too. And
made the right choice.
And then he said Linda, and we said, oh, that could be really interesting. So we got in touch with her, and she said, sure, but being the genius she is, I was thinking we would do a phone call and we would tape record it and then transcribe it. But she said, let's be pen pals. And we literally wrote letters to each other for over 2 months. And then I thought she was going to do a combination of her letters and my letters, but she ended up just taking my letters and cutting them up and making a collage out of them. And it's probably my favorite thing in the book, just because it was just so interesting to do it that way. And someday we have to publish her letters, because her letters, my God, they were, her lettering alone looked like a monk did them to decorate a Bible. Mine are pretty sloppy.
No, I love Linda's work as well. I think that she is a genius even before that grant, the non-genius grant thing. And really, I highly encourage you to take a look at the end of the book there, where there's a lot of illustrations of Patrick in there. And yeah, let's take a look at the next slide. Right. So, I am happy enough to live on a planet where there is a Jane Goodall at the same time. You went a little step further than that. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, and I feel really blessed with this. Jane's been a hero of mine for years, and boy, the world could use more Jane Goodalls right now. So I did a strip in Mutts with Stinky Puddin, saying that the way he gets over compassion fatigue is he has an autographed photo of Jane Goodall, and then the Jane Goodall Institute got in touch with me, and they asked if they could use that art on an invitation. And I told them they can use that art any way they wanted. And I also said, I would love for Jane to have the original from that daily strip. And I asked if I could mail it to them. And they said, well, Jane's going to be in New York. Why don't you just give it to her? And I said, oh, okay. So I had this really wonderful pleasure and honor to meet Jane, give her the art. I also had the nerve to ask her if we could do a kid's book together someday. She liked the idea, but she was busy with her own book. So I went home and reread her autobiography, Reason for Hope. And if you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. A beautiful book. But in that book, one of the first photographs is Jane as not even 2 years old yet, with a stuffed chimpanzee doll that her dad gave her. And in reading her story, it was fate. She had this chimpanzee doll. She read Tarzan and Dr. Dolittle, and knew what she wanted to do at a really young age. And so that became the book. A couple of months later, she was back in New York, and I got to show her the dummy of it, and she liked it. And that became me, Jane, and we ended up becoming friends, which is mind-blowing.
It's lovely. Again, one of the other things that I like about this is that even though it is recognizable as your work and recognizable also as Jane Goodall, the palette is different. You have a different focus on the colors here. I don't know if you had something you were specific you were going for, or whether it just sort of happened as you went along.
I guess it sort of happened. Again, with the daily comic strip and the Sunday, I don't color the dailies, but I color the Sundays, and it's kind of tough when you have a limited palette. So when I get to do these books, I just get to have fun and kind of did a more muted jungle palette.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's a terrific book too. It's lovely. It's incredibly touching. Let's look at the next slide, please. Okay. So you have gone beyond strips in a lot of ways. And I asked you to put this in here because this is not in the book, but this is something that you had shared with me before. Personal work, right? Is that how you would put it?
Paintings, big sloppy paintings.
Yeah. And you're doing. Is this like work in the afternoons when you're doing things?
Usually I do these like 5:30 in the morning before I get to work. But before I did the comic strip, I used to do big abstract paintings just for fun, and the comic kept me busy, and the books kept me busy. But about 2 or 3 years ago, I felt like I wanted to paint again, so I started doing these big abstract paintings. Like this one in particular, I had to shoot it from a ladder on the floor because it's 12 feet long, and it's not even the whole painting in that picture. But I was doing these abstract paintings, and I did quite a few of them, and I wasn't showing them to anybody. The only person that saw them was my wife and my dog and cat. And then I thought it'd be fun if someone saw them, so I decided I was going to put Sluggo and Nancy into these paintings to look at them. and that became an addiction. I ended up putting Nancy and Sluggo in all my paintings, looking at them. And this one in particular, I was supposed to have a show of my paintings at Ohio State University. It would be there right now except for COVID. So it was canceled. But the building it was going to be in had a long hallway leading to the gallery. And this was going to be the first thing you would see as you walk in the gallery, which I thought was pretty funny. Nancy saying, "Let's go in," and Sluggo saying, "Okay." I thought maybe it would inspire someone to go see the show.
It's like, I like it. They've shown up at Ohio State University. They've walked into the gallery. They're not sure whether they're going to go all the way in. It sounds about right.
The good news is everything works out well. They're going to do the show next fall.
Yeah. So
it'll be on my site, mutts.com. So when it happens, you can find out when and where then.
And are you currently painting right now?
Yeah, I was off for a while, and then it hit me again, and I've been doing some new paintings, kind of still abstract with cartoons, but kind of living life in 2020 and what that's like.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of stars, circles, people with stars over their head. Cartoony stuff.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you're able to work these days. It's hit and miss for myself at this point. There's.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's just things change so rapidly. It's a little hard to know. I found that I sort of need a piece of ground to stand on to know, what to say. Is that something that's plaguing you or not?
Oh, definitely. Well, what's nice about the paintings is they're like a release because I don't have to think at all when I do them.
Yeah.
But the strip's been difficult. I've seen a lot of strips are having people with masks on and stuff, and I've kind of stayed away with that with Mutts. I feel like Mutts is an escape, and people could use a little of reality, and it seemed from dogs and cats' perspective. So my dog and cat's not wearing a mask right now. But it's still tough to with the comic strips, you have to be 6 weeks ahead. And because of the quarantine, I've actually, for the first time in 25 years, gotten more than 6 weeks ahead, which if I would have done 25 years ago, my life would have been different. But right now I'm doing strips for November and December, and boy, it's tough to think about what's the world going to be like in November and December, and are these strips going to mean anything, and what are they going to say? So it's been a little tough doing that. I mean, and you still want to be funny, and you still want to send out that love and compassion, and I think the world needs that, but it's still tricky trying to figure out how a particular strip's going to read, a couple of months from now.
Yeah, no, I hear that, and I mean,
I'm sure every cartoonist is having that problem.
Yeah, I mean, one of the good things for you is that there's a lot of animals involved, and they're not going to change on some level.
Well, that's what's nice about Mutts. It's really from the animal's point of view. So I mean, I do things like snow and rain and food, and all of that is still kind of the same. So that's keeping me grounded. So right now I'm thinking of snow jokes, which
That's good.
I'm guessing there'll still be snow somewhere.
Let's look at the next slide. So,
excuse me, I guess we can ask, are we doing okay time-wise? Are we allowed to go over?
We're okay? All right,
sorry, okay.
We'll keep everybody here as long as possible. So would you mind reading this?
Sure. This is Sourpuss, and he says, I was thinking of all my problems. I was thinking of all the pain of the past. I was thinking of all the uncertainty of the future. I was thinking, poor, poor me, my sad life. And then I was thinking how little time there is. And I'm really thinking it's all just hopeless. What can I do? Which says, stop thinking.
Perfect. There's always, when I'm describing your strip to people who haven't said it, I say there's a level of spirituality to it. And there's a very specific sort of spirituality in a way, which is I feel like this strip throbs with it, this particular one, in that there's an illuminating way of letting go of your problems that comes in a way. At the end, it's like, well, that's obvious. Yes, of course, that makes sense. But it's hard when there's all this buzz of thought going on in your head. Yeah.
Well, this particular strip was based on Eckhart Tolle, the spiritual teacher who wrote The Power of Now, which when I read just definitely spoke to the artist in me. And, because it is about, well, as a writer, you get in the zone, and you let the universe come in and you try to keep your ego and your thoughts out of the way. And so this was my version of getting to what he was trying, what he says, which is basically stop thinking, shut off that constant chatter that keeps on telling you how horrible things are. And, his feeling is, what's the problem right here in the present moment? That if you stay in the now, there is no problem. You're just here. And so that was Mooch doing his version of Eckhart Tolle. And that title panel is based on one of Eckhart Tolle's covers. I think it's, something with the word silent. I can't think of the title, but it's a version of one of his books that were really important to me and are still important. And I guess I don't think we show a slide of it, but I had the pleasure to do a book with him called Guardians of Being. I mean, the other reason I really like his work is that he talks about our dogs and cats taking us out of our minds and bringing us back to the moment, and how they're guardians of being. And I truly believe that. It's hard to think of all your problems when you're petting your cat on your lap. Yeah. Or throwing the ball at your dog, So, so his work influenced me a lot and made a big difference in my life.
And same here. I think you were one of the people who recommended him to me, and at that particular point, to me specifically, the one thing that got me was one of the sentences in The Power of Now, where he said, "Can you imagine what your next thought is?"
It blew your mind.
It stopped it. It was great.
Did you find that, for me, when I read it, I felt like he was talking to the artist in me. The real Patrick McDonnell is, filled with problems and has all that stuff going on, but the artist in me, understood being in the present moment and letting things go. I'm guessing as a writer, you must feel the same way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like a lot of my job is just to notice stuff and to just turn off the ego that I've got. And I've got, a 900 halogen watt ego that really throws everything else into shadow. So the idea of turning off the ticker tape parade that goes on here all the time, as Sourpuss has going on, is very appealing to me. And I never even thought about that. The idea that you are not what you think, it just, I still stumble over that all the time in a very good way. And then the thing is, once you have all that chatter turned off, what's there? And it's the stuff you notice. It's the materials of art.
Yeah. All of a sudden, the world appears.
Let's check out the next slide.
Shelter stories. Chickpea and Chickpea's brother. Well, the shelter's closing up for another day. We didn't get picked. I know. Tomorrow, guaranteed.
So on an artistic level, it's the waiting for Godot a little bit in there, with a little more hope in this case. But also just, beyond the, you do some very practical things. And Shelter Stories has been one of the delights for me in the years when you really do things that benefit directly, animals here. I imagine you've gotten a lot of reactions to these stories.
Yeah, people like the Shelter Stories. And for me in particular, I mean, nothing makes my day any more than someone saying they were inspired to go get a new best friend from their local shelter because of the strips. This one in particular was a week-long story about Chickpea and Chickpea's brother. And at the end of it, this was the last one. They didn't get adopted. Boy, I did get a lot of mail from people saying, you gotta adopt them. Usually I do Shelter Stories. Well, I usually do Shelter Stories in May and November, and I think this one appeared in May. And I had to do I think I did the next one sooner than November because people were so upset. And the next one was them getting adopted together as a team.
That's good there. Well, I picked the strip in part because it just transitions into the next strip. So, where do we start on this exactly? Among the many lovely things you've done, you have put this strip up for auction. It's currently up at auction at Heritage Auctions. If you go over there to their website, put in Patrick's name or Mutts, the strip will come up. And it benefits a local shelter, the local shelter and trap neuter return organization, the Stray Cat Alliance in Los Angeles. And unlike any other Mutts strip, it is a pandemic-based strip. But do you want to talk about this?
Well, of course, not only is it a pandemic-based strip, it's a Glen Gold written strip. Glenn was nice enough to email me and said that he had a dream of Mutts comics talking about the pandemic. And like I said before, I was kind of staying away from that. I feel like people needed a little break from it. But I loved your ideas and thought it would be fun to do them and put them on mutts.com, but not in the paper, but on mutts.com for people to see. So this is the strips where Ozzy, Millie, and Butchie do have masks on. And you wrote a whole week's worth of stuff. I did 2 of them. And this was one of them that I hand-colored. It was Glenn's idea to put it up for auction to benefit the local animal shelter. And we picked Stray Cat Alliance based out of LA that has been around for a long time saving stray cats.
It's lovely, and thank you very much for the work you do for everybody. And it also, for people who are interested in the strip, to bring this full circle, Patrick doesn't sell his strips very much. They occasionally come up for auction, but very rarely. So this is a rare opportunity. Get in on it.
And it's going to a good cause.
going to an excellent cause, yeah.
And it's watercolored, so it's got that little extra going for it.
It does.
This was when the Fatty Snacks Deli, that was another thing I promised. Besides free and guard dog, I promised that Butchie would go vegan someday. So we finally did this year. So that's the new Fatty Snacks Veggie Deli.
Yeah, I'm loving the strips about that, by the way, as they're coming out.
Thanks.
Change over. It's
going to slowly have them get thinner and thinner. Over the years, you'll see them get thinner.
Okay, let's take a look at our last couple here. Let's take a look at the next one. This was recent. Yeah. It's the Great Wave. And with Krabby on this, I just picked this because I think it speaks for itself, and it speaks for itself especially right now in mid-August of 2020.
That's definitely a 2020 strip. Yeah. And like I said, it's funny. I probably did this. It's August. I probably did it in May, not knowing what August was going to bring to us. But I figured we still might need this feeling, this phrase in August, and I feel like we're going to need this phrase for a while. But it'll get us through.
Yeah, it's very fitting. And I think we got one last slide. Is that right?
I think there's one more, right?
Last, yeah. I picked this because I thought it was beautiful, but please tell us. Please read to us.
You read this one.
Okay. Littermates. Littermates. All of us. Really.
Yeah, this was a great poet named Daniel Ladinsky, who I was an admirer of. He's really known for translating Hafiz and Rumi poems, but his poems are just really spiritual and fantastic, but they also have a sense of humor, and he talks a lot about animals, so they really appealed to me, and I just felt really close to him. So, in my sketchbooks, I started fooling around with drawing illustrations for some of his poems, and I had a batch of them, and I kind of liked them, and I thought maybe he would get a kick out of them, so I got his address and mailed him. And a year went by, and I took it for granted that I insulted the poet. Why the poet want his poems illustrated by a cartoonist? And kind of forgot about it. But then he was a traveling poet. He was out of the country for a year. When he finally came home and saw him, he really liked them and said, "Forget about illustrating old poems. I'll write new MUTTS poems." And I tell you what a thrill! For like 2 months, every day I would get a couple of new poems, little haikus. In my mailbox for like 2 months, and it was really fun illustrating them. And this one in particular, I just feel like sums up MUTTS. It's a great poem to end the talk on, because I think that's at the heart of MUTTS. We're all littermates. God, if anything, I feel like this world now, that's a lesson we all need to learn, that we're just all littlemates. Really, we're just all together on this planet.
We definitely are, and it's a beautiful and demonstrable lesson as well. It's not just aspirational, but easily achievable.
You hope.
So we have come to the end of our visual part of this presentation here, and are we opening it up to the floor at this point? How's this working?
Yeah, and I'll be the ominous voice from on high. I'm Nina, I'm the program organizer for the Cartoon Art Museum. So we'll start Q&A in just a moment. We're going to show you that loading beginning scene one more time. You can check out Muttville. You can check out the books that we have available with original Cartoon Art Museum book plates signed by Patrick. So I'll switch to that for a moment, and then when we come back, we'll come back with our Q&A. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are here with the Q&A session. Just shift our windows just one more time to make sure everybody's in queue. All right, so the first question we got tonight was from Russell, who is on Divisadero Street here in San Francisco. Asked Patrick, your comedic timing, panel pacing, punchlines, puns, etc. is razor sharp. Does constantly writing for your characters keep the humor well honed? What are fresh and current inspirations that make you laugh during these tough times?
Well, thanks for the compliment. Yeah, I think timing and rhythm. I think part of it for me is I'm a drummer, and I really feel like timing and rhythm is all how you tell and frame a joke, and it has a lot. I think that influences me. And as far as things that I always read the classics. I'm always reading Crazy Cat, and Schultz, and boy, Tom the Dancing Bug. As far as current event humor, I can't say enough about Tom the Dancing Bug. You should check that out.
And then,
how about you, Glenn? What are you reading nowadays, or what makes you laugh?
Well, let's see. What's making me laugh is mostly a lot of stuff. I just started watching this thing last night. Teenage Bounty Hunters.
Sounds good.
On Netflix. It is the most profane. I don't even believe this show actually exists. It's like I feel like I could get arrested just for watching it. It is about some teenage bounty hunters. It's fiction, and it has made me laugh consistently. As did it's kind of like a combination of Barry and the Babysitters Club, if you can imagine that.
Okay.
It looks like a good one. And Jessica Klein asked for Patrick, would you or have you ever considered creating a Mutts animated cartoon or movie? Maybe a holiday movie. I think thinking in the frame of like the Charles Schultz movies.
Well, not only have I thought about that, I've been in the process of it for, I don't even know, but I think it might be 10 years now. But quite a few. Actually, Glenn, you interviewed me at the Comic-Con when it was announced.
I did.
So how long ago was that? A long time ago.
I want to say was that 8 years ago? So.
Yeah, probably. But anyway, Fox Movies bought Mutts to do a full animation movie, and it kind of took a year just to do the legal aspect of it because I was insisting that I write it, and we worked all that out, and I spent a couple of years fine-tuning it. When I finally wrote the fourth draft and everyone loved it, looked like it was a go, is when Disney started buying up Fox. So everything went on hold, and now Disney has Mutts, and we started looking at that movie again, and it looked like everyone was really excited, and I was excited. And then COVID happened, and everything got on hold. So it's been an on-hold project, but I have a feeling it's going to start up again, and it would be really exciting to have Earl and Mooch come on the screen. And actually, there is talk about maybe it being a holiday movie too.
Oh, interesting.
Which I would love. I mean, God, I'd love the Peanuts Christmas special. God, I was a kid when that came out, and that I was in love with Peanuts, and that just took me over the moon. That was just done so beautifully. Recently, I think you can buy it on Amazon, but recently they put together a combination of 3 of the Peanuts holiday specials, and they had different people do voiceover, while the film's going, you got to talk about what it meant to you, a voiceover. And I got to do that they asked me to do the Christmas special. It was a lot of fun to look at again and give you my 2 cents on why it's so magical. Somewhere you can buy that on Blu-ray.
Somewhere out there. And
Yeah.
Mark, and if I mispronounce anyone's names, I apologize in advance. I'm trying to do my best without being able to communicate with anyone. Mark Camilla, I believe, asked, "How did you come up with Mooch?"
How'd I come with Mooch? Yeah, actually, that's a funny story. As a kid, I always wanted a dog, mainly because I loved Snoopy. But my mom and dad didn't think me and my siblings could handle a dog, so we had cats, and which were easier. Um, so I loved cats, but my whole life I wanted to get a dog. And I was drawing this little white dog in my illustrations, and someone told me it was a Jack Russell Terrier. And I looked it up, and sure enough, I didn't know I was drawing a Jack Russell, but I was drawing a Jack Russell. I thought I was drawing a generic funny dog. And then I got a Jack Russell, Earl, and he inspired me to finally do a strip about him. And in my sketchbook, I thought it might be funny if he met a cat and had some trouble with a cat that lived next door. And I literally thought that would be good for a week's worth of jokes. And just the way cats are, they come into your life and don't leave. So Mooch kind of took over this strip, and that's how Mooch took over Mutts. And he's based on a lot of the cats I've had over the years.
And then Rula asked, what was it like for you to make the butcher shop vegan? And saying that they personally are so happy that you did it.
Well, that's nice to hear. Like I said, for the last 15 years, I've been promising that I would free guard dog and that Butchie would go vegetarian or vegan. And I've been putting it off. And finally, I thought this was a good year. Especially when you look at COVID, got people eating bats, just the craziness of factory farming, and for so many levels, I think it makes sense to go vegetarian, vegan. And I always found it a little strange. I've been vegetarian for over 30 years, and vegan probably for like 15. And it's always a little strange that a deli with salamis, hams, I had to draw all the time in my strip. So it just felt like this was finally the right time to do it. And I got a really nice response from it, which is good. And I mean, it's not going to change anything. Earl and Mooch are still going to go there and try to mooch off food. But I think it's an important message. And not that I'm trying to, preach about it, but to me, every little thing you could do. I mean, when I first started, my wife and I laugh about it now, but when I first started, we said we were only going to eat meat once a day. Or we wouldn't eat meat once a day for one of the meals. And then it became once a week, and then it became once a month, and then all of a sudden it was like, we don't need to eat meat. I mean, even if people just did Meatless Monday, it would save thousands of animals, and it would get you on the right foot to maybe slowly weaning off. And nowadays it's easy. God, I think that's the other thing with COVID that's been helpful is I see the Beyond Meat and the Impossible Burgers really catching on. And I always thought the vegetarian and vegan chefs were going to save the planet, and it looks like that might happen.
And Card to Angelo asked Patrick, did you draw the panel with the vase multiple times, or just add the ears to a copy?
No. That all those are drawn. Each panel is different. I didn't Xerox it, or listen, I'm still old school. I dip a pen into a bottle of ink, so I guess if I was on the computer, I could just repeat it 3 times, but I actually drew those each time.
I think it. And do you have any thoughts about that, Glenn? I think it gives it more life every time you redraw it.
Well, yeah, it's actual time passing. When you do 3 different panels, there's going to be slight differences in shadow. I mean, there's going to be different types of cross hatching and things like that. It'll be subtle, but your eye notices. Your eye notices when you're being cheated.
Boy, Glenn, that's fantastic. I never thought of that. Oh. It's time passing. A little difference in shadow. Wow, that's good.
Run with it.
So Mark Johnson asks, what book has the bamboo and doe image that was shown during the presentation?
Yeah, that book is called South, and it's with Little Brown, and on Amazon or Mutts.com, I think, sells it too. So if you go on Mutts.com, you'll get an autographed version. And if you go to the San Francisco Francisco Cartoon Art Museum, you can get an autographed version of the 25th anniversary book.
Thanks for the plug, Patrick.
A little plug.
So Seth Shield asks, you said you have about 12 regular characters. What was the last original character, and do you think about adding another regular character? With all the pressure of a daily strip, do you keep a strict work schedule?
Well, that's a good question. What was the last character? I guess I haven't done one in a while because my mind's going blank. You know, it's funny. I every once in a while I think it would be fun to do a new character, but God, I live with Earl and Mooch, so if anything, over the years, it's become more the Earl and Mooch. I think in the past there was more Stinky and more Wolfie and more Guard Dog. But again, you don't plan these things when you do a daily strip. They sort of just happen. And when I think about it now, it's really become kind of the Earl and Mooch show, which I guess makes sense. I mean, they're like classic comedy team that you end up. It's an old cliche, but to a certain extent, they kind of write themselves. I know them so well. That's where I always kind of end up going. And I add new characters. Like even this week in the papers, they're down the shore and they're meeting a jellyfish and they met a porpoise. But as far as a character that stuck around, boy, I think it's been a while. So maybe I'm way overdue. I need to add a new character.
And for the other part of that, because of the pressure of a daily strip, do you keep a strict work schedule?
Yeah, I think it's changed over the years. Right now, I kind of write 3 to 4 weeks worth of ideas, and then I sit down and knock them out, And then I have like 2 or 3 weeks off, but I'm not really off because during those 2 or 3 weeks I work on the book projects and the other things in life that I'm working on, the paintings and things. So there's really not too much time off, and that's fairly new. When I first started, I worked pretty much every day, just trying to figure out how do you do a daily comic strip. So over the years it's changed, but right now it's a little healthier, and because of the quarantine, actually, like I said, for the first time in 25 years, I've actually gotten a little ahead. So I've had a little more space, which is really nice to have. And I'm actually playing with two book ideas. And one of them kind of hit the wall, but the other one seems like it's up and running. So I'm probably going to go head first into this new book project, which I don't want to talk about yet, but it's really exciting. It's going to be fun to do.
I think that transitions into the next audience question fairly well. They're asking, with the newspaper industry sort of sliding or collapsing or shifting, however you might want to describe it, how has making a living as a cartoonist changed for you?
Boy, knock on wood, there was a real scare about that a few years ago, and I did lose a handful of papers, but it seemed to stabilize. And I mean, who knows what the future's going to bring? And I feel sorry for young cartoonists coming up. I mean, it's hard to try to encourage someone to go in the business because who knows where it's going. But I think the art of telling stories with words and pictures isn't going to go anywhere. I mean, graphic novels are bigger than ever. Internet comics. I just feel like that's never going to disappear. There's always going to be a market for it. And it's just trying to navigate how do you actually make a living off it. And I feel kind of blessed that I started before there was an internet, and newspapers were really important, and comic strips were really important. And I've been able to ride that wave now for 25 years. So as far as my life goes, it hasn't changed that much. I pretty much sit at the drawing table and draw funny pictures.
And Glenn, did you have any thoughts about that shifting change in the sort of how comics are in the world now?
I was thinking about that because I'm mostly a consumer of that, of course, and it's broad. I mean, right? It's funny. My reaction to the last couple of years is to subscribe to everything. I subscribe to all the newspapers there are, basically, that I can. And part of that, and then also trying to make sure that anybody whose work I'm consuming, I'm
paying something for it. So I have, I understand that there's whole ways of reading comics right now that are more digital and that a lot of people are comfortable with, but I still go to my, local comic shop and pick stuff up when I do. So part of that is because it's not because I'm a Luddite, it's just because I'm just much more comfortable with the physical object. And then also, I really like the idea of people getting paid.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. There's nothing like holding the book and just.
I just got the new Nancy book by Olivia James. I find it hilarious. There's plenty of stuff I hadn't seen before, but it's great. It's like I look at that and I go, well, here's somebody else that I'm going to be following for a long time.
Yeah, I'm a fan too. I mean, I'm a crazy big fan of Ernie Bushmiller, and somehow magically she obviously is not doing Ernie Bushmiller, but there's definitely a link there. They're fun.
Yeah, and I think the ways that artists are making money is shifting a lot, and there's a lot of opportunities out there for a wider array of artists to be able to kind of make it on their own in ways they couldn't have before. But I'm so thankful and so glad that we've been able to be blessed with your work, Patrick, for so long. And get through those scares with the newspapers. To kind of switch things to a lighter theme, and I'm gonna kind of switch up the last 2 or 3 questions, and ask Mark. Asks again, where or when did you come up with stinky pudding?
Stinky pudding. It's funny. My wife rescued a little kitten in Jersey City, a parking garage in Jersey City, and when she brought him home, it was a surprise to me, and he was covered in filth and really smelled bad. And we actually had this conversation, which Earl and Mooch eventually had, but she said, what should we call him? And I took a look at him and smelled him. I said, we should call him Stinky. She said, we can't call him Stinky. We have to call him something sweet like Puddin'. So we came up with the name Stinky Puddin'. It didn't stick on the real cat, but it became a character in Mutts. And Earl and Mooch found this little kitten in a garbage can and kind of adopted him. And then it was a Christmas story. It was a very Little Orphan Annie type of story. I was a big fan of Little Orphan Annie by Gray. Back then, I used to do stories. I think that story lasted 3 weeks. So it was a 3-week story. Actually, it's printed in a book called Stinky Little Christmas that I think you can still buy.
And to lead up to our last question of the evening, so this is the precursor to the last question, Gayhers asks, as an advocate of adoption, and for doing this for so long, how many pets have you adopted, Patrick?
Quite a few, although I have to tell you, with the cats in my life, every cat found me, and that's sort of how Mooch came into the strip. But just recently, we had a feral cat that passed away. This was maybe 3 years ago, and I said, well, let's go adopt a new cat, but I knew I was going to go on a book tour, and I didn't want to get a cat because I knew I wasn't going to be home. So I said, we'll do it. We can't do it in October. We'll have to do it in November when the book tour is over. And darn if October 1st, we discovered a cat in our backyard. I said, I think that might be feral. And then her 3 little kittens followed her. And I said, I think she's definitely feral. And we caught all of them and found homes for all of them. We kept one. So right now I have that cat that was living in our backyard. And I have a new Jack Russell named Amelie. And we got Amelie like a year after Earl passed away. And when you have a Jack Russell, that's like having 5 dogs. So the Jack Russell and the cat is sort of like the strip. I have a dog and a cat right now. And I know Glen has a lot of feral cats, and the same thing, that they come into your life like least expect it.
Yeah, I've been doing the math in my head right now. I pretty much need to use scientific notation to count the number of cats that come through my life.
I was curious, Glenn. Is that a cat tree next to you that I'm seeing?
It is, and 1 second. Let me see if I can. Right, that's so up here.
The whole time.
Whole time, yes. This is
Wow.
Buster.
That's great.
This is Buster Kitten. Yeah.
Hey, Buster.
Yeah. And that's my girlfriend's cat. We live in a duplex, and so it's important to know this. That so she's in one unit, I'm in the other, and I have 2 cats. She has 2 cats. This does not mean we have 4 cats.
But that's her cat.
A lot of cats.
But that's her cat in your place right now.
What's your point, Patrick?
It's nice to have 4 cats. That's great.
Yeah, no, we've got 4 cats. We last year we fostered for Lux Paws locally, and Sarah had 2 cats at that point. She had a very elderly cat named Bogey who was he was fading, and there was a little tiny kitten who looked an awful lot like Bogey, who we had fostered. He ended up hanging out, and Bogey hung out long enough to teach him how to cat. So, now we're back.
What was the new cat's name?
The new cat had about 47 different names. Went through many different names, and gender changes. We didn't know he was a girl at first, but he's a boy. He's kind of a Russian gray. He's got a very intense stare. He's very judgmental. So his name is Mikhail Farezhnikov.
Nice.
And he goes by Misha.
Nice.
Some strong pet names. So now we're going to transition so that you guys can ooh and ah over the charity that we are supporting today, Muttville, the senior dog rescue. So we'll switch back to the screen so that everybody else can see who you guys are talking about as well. And we want to know.
The San Francisco area to go get Simpson, bramble, broccoli, fry, or truffle. Broccoli's a great name.
Broccoli's a great name, and I'm looking at Simpson right now, and it looks like Simpson is ready to come into your life and set it straight. Like he's got a plan. He's definitely concerned that there's things you're not doing right, and he really wants to help you out with that. I can tell. And Truffle, what a sweet face Truffle has too. I mean, horrible.
And Bramble looks like he's worried that you need a dog very badly. Why not him?
Yeah.
Fry looks a lot like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, I see that. Fry's adorable as well. I think these are all good for the San Francisco-sized houses and apartments too.
Oh, you're right.
I was saying it's great for the San Francisco palate as well. As I was putting this together, I was just craving truffle and broccoli fries. I figured out why, but yeah, these all sort of take your heart out. And I think, Patrick, at the very beginning, we might have missed what you said, because this used to be our screen that didn't have audio. For the audience, could you just say sort of one more time that beautifully impassioned moment that you had?
Oh, sure. Well, talking about Muttville, I mean, what's so wonderful about Muttville is it's an organization that specializes in senior dogs. And I was saying that, Earl was based on my own Jack Russell Earl, who literally lived to 19 years old. And boy, there's nothing like an old dog. I mean, at the end, it's funny, he was blind and deaf, but and just a frail little guy, but still had all this energy and love. And I just felt like all that was left was the love. He was like an old stuffed toy that you just loved, and was still giving all that love back. And just a great dog, and I'm sure all of these guys are the same. I mean, there's nothing like an old dog. They're just smart, and have all that life experience and all that love still to give. You can't go wrong, I think, adopting any of these guys.
Thank you, Patrick. And just a reminder, if anyone has room in their home for one of these adorable Muttville senior dogs, or to bring into their home the Art of Nothing, which encapsulates 25 years of the Mutts comic strips, or the recent catalog, A Boy and His Tiger, which is a tribute to Bill Watterson that Patrick also contributed to, as well as Hot Dog, Hot Cats. You can find those at cartoonart.org/store, and you can find those adorable pups at muttville.org. We'll switch back to Patrick and Glen one more time to say thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. We really appreciate you being here, whether you're on the West Coast or East Coast or somewhere in between or on the other side. And we appreciate you being here with us and supporting us today. Thank you, Patrick, so much for being here today, for contributing your time and sharing your talent with us. And thank you, Glen, for giving us a great afternoon and a very entertaining chit-chat between the two of you. We really appreciate it. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Summerlee, and thank you to the San Francisco Cartoon Art Museum. And hopefully next year I could be there in person.
Yes, next year in person. All right, awesome. Thank you both.
And Glen, thank you. That was a lot of fun.
Again, it's ever my pleasure, Patrick. It's always good to talk to you. And it's nice to have a couple hours pass where you get to focus on art for a bit. And,
nice.
Gets you jazzed up again, you know.
And we should thank the audience for putting up with us. For God, we went 43 minutes over.
Holy cow! Yeah, you guys are timers there. Thank you very much for doing your part there.
Yep. Okay, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Take care.